So I am very happy to be able to present this art exhibition to all of you. Thank you for all the volunteers that have actually came to help set up. Martin Luther King once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." When we are fighting a fight, we shouldn't be focusing only on this moment. We need to look at the big picture and plan ahead for the future movement at hand. We should always try to understand our enemies. It takes time, patience, and calculation to be able to do what the communists have done. But how exactly did we get here? Of course, the Westernized world would have let the communists did what they have done, but they went out and lived in the strategic places. They studied the Westernized world. They made friends with them, speak their languages, and get them lower their guards. Slowly but surely, they bring in theirs. And then they attract their enemies to play by their rules, so-called opening up the biggest market to the world. Then the money flows. They made the world voluntarily bring their technology, their ideas to them. They took them and they built on them, making technology working better for their own ideas. Because as the communists, everything is state-owned, money is never an issue. The democratic world instead has individuals, and some of them are corrupted also, who sabotage the action and the goal for the greater good. That's democracy for you. By nature, this will not lead to a powerful country. Many individuals in the Westernized world have lots of money. If we could pool all those wealth together, wouldn't it be more than what the communists have? But because of the way the Westernized world is, individuals struggle and suffer alone, and they compete among themselves for greater power. The communists, in general, work together. Look at China. Even though they are not openly supporting Russia to avoid sanctions from the Westernized world, it has not thrown Russia under the bus, not yet at least. After decades of breastfeeding, China grew into an aggressive animal. The economic rise of China leads to waves of money flowing into the Westernized economies, vesting increasing Chinese exposure, engagement, and interference in local markets. What we can do now, in my opinion, is to continue to raise awareness on what they have done, to raise awareness on what they can do and what they want. Not being ignorant to it. China now does not only seek regional interference and influence as so many great powers do, but to prepare to shape the 21st century. China's leadership and foreign policy elite, they declare that this is a period of historical opportunity to expand the country's strategic focus from Asia to the wider globe and to its governance systems. Look at how vocal the Chinese government has been on Chinese ambitious and aggressive internationally over the last decade. We want to create the generation we want to bring back, to bring the Hongkongers' qualities into the world. What are those qualities? We work hard, we are smart, and we survive in whatever situations and circumstances we find ourselves in. We never give up, and we help each other. With that said, we need to continue to show the world what we need to work together to combat all these regimes, put pressure on governments to put human rights before trade, cut all the investment in communist countries to stop feeding them, decrease dependency of our supply chains and manufacturing processes on them, put financial pressures on them, and strengthen local businesses. With what had happened to Hong Kong provides a blueprint on the tactics these regimes can apply to the Westernized world. In fact, it has already happening to some countries in Africa and also in Asia, in Australia. Even in UK, businesses, infrastructure, properties, and other assets worth really £135 billion, much of which was acquired in recent years. The threats that these regimes are imposing in Canada cannot be ignored. Many Canadian universities accept donations and fundings from Chinese companies in R&D in different ways, in different areas. Leading Canadian technology and research efforts exporting to China directly, and even worse, effectively leaving Canada out of the picture altogether. Other than obvious foreign forces, we also see an increase in Canadians acting as foreign agents to other governments. Foreign agent is a Canadian who lobbies or communicates on behalf of a foreign principal to influence Canadian governmental policies or public opinion, including advocating as a foreign principles. But this is in the nation's interest of Canada that this can be done openly and transparently, so that fellow Canadians will see whether these people lobbying is actually in the best interest of Canadians. Lobbying also extends to arrangements in retired officials where they continue to work in fields related to their formal status. We have seen recently, for example, a number of retired Canadian ambassadors voicing their support for the Chinese Communist Party, where we know for a fact that the CCP doesn't have the same values as we do. Australia, seeing what is happening, is ahead of us in responding to this threat, especially through the Foreign Interface Transparency Scheme. This act is not to stop the foreign interference or influence, but demands this kind of influence to be transparent to the government. And then the government can issue a transparency notice, and non-compliance can trigger criminal offenses. These artworks that we've got here this week will allow attendees to feel the mentality and mindset change among Hong Kongers over the last few years due to the certain social events and political environment changes in the city. With that said, we also hope to raise Canadians' concern on human rights, abuse that is happening in Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Tibet. So please enjoy the exhibition and hope that you will tell your friends to come and join us. We will get the artists to introduce themselves and talk about their artwork.
Okay.
You can talk.
Okay. Hi, my name is Franklin, and I have been a photographer for many years. And during 2019, at the end of that year, I kind of used my mental state of mind and create a series of photographs. Because at that moment, what's happening in Hong Kong, I'm stuck here. I could not go back, and it's like every morning I wake up to like, will there be some drastic news or people dying or whatever is happening? So I actually created a series of photographs. and then I match it with some quotes of George Orwell, 1984. What I'm trying is to raise, or maybe stimulate people when they look at the pictures and the quote. Maybe they throw question to themselves, and this is what I intend to do. So please enjoy. Any question, I'll be answering you guys.
Hi, my name is Christy, and my artworks are actually just watercolors and pencils. They're like children's book illustrations. And the series is called "I Don't Like My Grandpa." So basically, I'm using metaphor to show that Hong Kong is a little girl and Grandpa is China. Because in Hong Kong, we usually call China the Grandpa. But I find it very sarcastic because Grandpa is supposed to be a very benevolent, very kind character. But in how people when we are addressing China as Grandpa and how we see him, what he did to us, it doesn't feel like a grandpa to us. So I use that as a metaphor to emphasize the sarcastic or the ironic relationship between Hong Kong and China. And the artworks are actually thank you. Focusing the target, the target audience are actually for foreigners or people who are not really into politics, because politics is a very heavy subject. They're people who not really know about Hong Kong, they may find it very heavy. So I use family, domestic violence to illustrate the relationship between Hong Kong and China. Thank you.
Now let's give the mic to Julie. Hi.
Hi everybody, can you hear me all right? Well, it's nice to be here virtually. I'm sorry I can't be here in person. It's cool to see something like this organized, so my kudos to you all. I wanted to recognize that, we obviously is working closely with the Uyghur community, which is something I'm privileged both here in the United States and abroad, and this really is something you guys are to recognize the ways that everything had. And I'm honored today to just spotlight the ways that an issue near and dear to my heart, which is the most egregious example of human rights abuses in the modern age, is connected to the deliberate trampling of democratic freedoms and human rights in Hong Kong and to other things that are going on in the world. We're living in an age which really requires us to recognize the fact that there is in fact an ideological line in the sand that's been drawn, and we need to wake up to the reality that I think at present many people in the international community view diplomacy as the end goal rather than the tool that you use to ensure that freedom and respect for every human life is protected. And so obviously the Chinese Communist Party, and as was mentioned earlier with its ideological and other alliances with Russia, is demonstrating that it is an enormous threat, not just to the international rules-based order, but to really the entire global community and human dignity across the world. So national community that we could, as was so well said in the beginning, remake the Chinese Communist Party or the Russian regime for that matter in our own image by opening up economically and using the power of greed, for example, has been really disastrous because we've effectively empowered abusers to further abuse the most vulnerable with new tools and methods of manipulation, not just within China's borders, but in nations around the world. And so I think a lot of people right now, in spite of seeing the fall of Hong Kong play out right before them, in spite of maybe having heard of the Uyghur genocide and what's going on, still believe it's worthwhile to pursue seeking some type of assurances from CCP leadership. And while an active genocide is raging on, that's quite preposterous. The most massive failure of the international community to date has been the failure to stop the Uyghur genocide, which is entering its 6th clear implications to the protesters in Hong Kong who held signs proclaiming they did not want to be the next Xinjiang. And so we're really seeing that the largest mass incarceration of an ethno-religious group since the Holocaust is continuing on with little consequence. And John Lee, newly elected quote-unquote leader, is praising that system. And so we need to recognize the warning signs that these brutalities will continue to spread, that true evil does exist, and events like this do serve to remind us, though, that there can be solidarity in those who are going to resist. And so just to kind of paint a picture of what the Uyghur genocide is, for anybody who maybe is not familiar, though unfortunately this has been an enormous thing for our community, is that even in the last year and a half, we've seen an enormous uptick in awareness of who the Uyghurs are. Previously, this was a group of people that most people were unfamiliar with, and now, unfortunately, most people have at least heard of the Uyghurs, unfortunately, in association with genocide. But we are talking about people that are being imprisoned in concentration camps. No trial, no clear indication for most of why they're being detained other than their ethnic or religious identity. Sometimes not even that. And we continue to hear brutal information about the treatment, both inside and outside of the camps. Effectively, the entire region has been turned into this technologically enabled police state, where it's essentially an open-air prison even outside of the camps. And we've continued to see that a lot of those tools that were tested out on the Uyghurs in terms of surveillance, in terms of detention, are now being utilized across mainland China, most particularly in the instance of Shanghai recently. And so we obviously have an enormous amount of concern as those who've advocated on Uyghur genocide to continue to let the rest of the world know that these things will affect other communities, and we're very concerned as we watch young protesters in Hong Kong continue to be arrested, and that, of course, similar systems may be implemented quite soon. And so I do think the invasion and brutal war crimes in Ukraine has been a real stark reminder that the Chinese and Russian regimes headed by Xi mean what they say when they declare an ideological war on democratic ideals and really the values of humanity. And it is a war that at this point they are willing to move beyond the ideological. And so when we see that the future of a new world order can be manipulated by a malign state actor, and one which is reinstating modern-day slavery through Uyghur forced labor and concentration camps while it continues to buy the silence of the international community, and bodies meant to stop the atrocities, including the United Nations. We continue to see that corporations like Nike, Coca-Cola, and then solar companies are profiting off of those horrors. And so there is an enormous challenge before us, where governments have failed to perform their duty. It really is left to people like us. And so where our governments are still failing to address human rights crises today, it is left to us to remind them, to promote them, and to fully realize the gift for those of us that live in democratic countries of those democratic freedoms by continuing to call out where our own leaders have failed to defend these values and principles. And so it can be really difficult, I think, still for many in the United States and in Canada, and particularly in the parliament, in politics, to really fully grasp and be willing to commit to taking action, to really hold on to the reality that something so evil as concentration camps with mass sterilization in the modern age could be occurring, and that this type of brutal authoritarianism is continuing to spread. But it's really the ultimate form of privilege to continue to bury our heads in the sand and ignore these realities, or think that we can continue to prioritize economic trade with China over these things. And so I would say, in general, we're being conditioned to accept that we should give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Part of that is in line with our Western values. We've been conditioned to believe even that a country that has deliberately withheld information on COVID from the world could cooperate with us. And I find that belief absolutely preposterous. Kind of still being conditioned by many and power to accept that leaders can choose to believe that human rights are not their lane, that we should separate the issues, and that's really beyond appalling, because what are we left to believe then as Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hongkongers, Southern Mongolians, and even Chinese people themselves, and so many others are being treated as if their lives are disposable. And so we really need to reiterate to the world at this point in time that China has failed to be a country ruled by law. It has failed to ever acknowledge human rights. It's failed to keep any of its promises to the international community. And the worldview of its leaders is so fundamentally different than the rest of the world that taking innocent civilians hostage is a normal behavior that's openly defended and met with little accountability. So I think our leaders require a shift in mindset to acknowledge reality and that we're not dealing with a competitor, we're dealing with an adversary, with a hostile and malign state power, with a group of people heading a nation that enjoy causing pain and suffering to others and are completely unrepentant about genocide. And if that fact in and of itself is taken, we cannot expect them to fulfill their promises or to engage with us on the same level on any issue. So we shouldn't engage with China as we would expect them to behave. They don't operate from an even remotely similar mindset, and that's what we as people who maybe firsthand have experienced some of that need to convey to the world. We are in the fight for our very lives and the future existence of global democracy, and it is on us to not allow human rights to fade away. So I will stop there, but I just wanted to thank all of you for coming out today, and thank you for organizing this. And you know, these types of things are valuable. These are really art is able to I will do all of it. And let's keep up the good fight together. Thank you.
It's just symbolic, right? So there you go.
Okay, let's.
Yeah.
Thank
Yay!
you.
All right. So enjoy the show. This is going to be here for a week. Our closing is going to be on next Sunday at 2 p.m. There will be 2 other guest speakers. One of them is going to be here in person. Thank you very much.